Xartok prided himself on his culinary creations. It wasn't just about fusing flavours that shouldn't exist. He prided himself on flavours that delighted even the most finicky palate. Every dish he designed had a story, a symphony of scents, textures and subtle visual cues that coaxed his patrons into voyages of gastronomical discovery. Yet, the group that sat before him at a table set amidst his private garden biodome was an enigma he couldn't solve. These were the humans, the new ones, who smelled of recycled air, determination, and a lingering hint of battle smoke, despite their pristine uniforms. Rumours swirled about them. Warriors who had driven off something called the Thrax, their ferocity echoing in whispers throughout the Federation's polished halls. He had offered them his finest, a multi-course symphony inspired by their surprisingly varied homeworld cuisine. The results, so far, were perplexing. Sergeant Lee, a quiet human with bright eyes, devoured everything with joyful abandon. But the others poked, prodded, and analysed his creations with an intensity that sent his inner chef into a state of bewildered agony. Especially their leader, Captain Petrova. Her scarred face and unwavering gaze seemed at odds with the delicate floral notes of the appetizer meant to awaken the taste buds. Yet, as she meticulously dissected the xylar blossom salad with a precision he usually reserved for preparing razor-shell crab, a sliver of a smile touched her lips. "This," she finally announced, her voice oddly melodic despite its underlying edge, "has possibilities." The others around the table, seasoned warriors all, echoed her approval. A wave of relief washed over Xartok, followed by a surge of insatiable curiosity. He couldn't resist. Leaning forward, his forearms giving him a slightly intimidating edge, he asked, "Tell me about these possibilities." The stories that followed were a whirlwind that nearly caused him to drop a tray of steaming cloudfruit pastries. These beings so soft and bipedal had endured horrors. Ambushes in shattered cities, desperate retreats, battles waged with dwindling supplies, and even less hope. Yet, as they recounted their tales, what struck him wasn't just the brutality of war, but a strange, desperate beauty. They spoke of camouflage crafted from ruined buildings, traps set with the ingenuity born of having nothing left to lose, and a general, this mythical General Thorn, who had bested their foe's champion in a duel that sounded more like a fever dream than military strategy. It was horrific, and yet Xartok's mind buzzed with possibilities. The charred sweetness of battlefields, the metallic tang of recycled oxygen, and the sharp notes of defiance were flavours, raw and potent, begging to be woven into a dish no sentient being had ever conceived. Xartok retreated to his kitchens, a storm of inspiration and horrified fascination raging within him. This wasn't just about creating a meal, this was about translating the visceral experience of war into edible art. But how? His usual tools, the delicate sweetness of flowering vines and the rhythmic bursts of flavour from cryopreserved fruits, felt woefully inadequate. He wandered the biodomes, searching. That's when he found them. The gnarled roots of a Thorlakian firebloom bush, barely contained by their planter. Thorlakian spice was agony in its pure form, the kind used in minute quantities to induce visions for certain religious sects. Yet, within those twisted roots, he sensed possibility, the bitter echo of loss, tempered by the tenacity of survival. For days, he barely slept. The pristine order of his kitchens descended into glorious chaos. He distilled, charred, infused, and meticulously rebuilt flavours. His staff, a menagerie of species who usually humoured his eccentricities, now watched with open apprehension. Finally, trembling with exhaustion and exhilaration that bordered on madness, he plated the dish. a swirl of charcoal-infused root puree, a delicate lattice of caramelized battle ration paste, microdots of cryo-seared Thorlakian spice that burst on the tongue with a delayed heat, and, crowning it all, a single vibrant green sprout, plucked from the biodome's human sustenance section. It looked less like food and more like an abstract sculpture, inspired by a battlefield story. With a pounding heart, he presented it to his most challenging patrons, the humans, the next opportunity he had. Captain Petrova's fork hovered, then speared a sliver of the blackened root puree. He held his breath. Her eyes widened, not in disgust, but in surprise. "This," she began, then paused, as if searching for the right words. "This tastes like holding on when there's nothing left to hold on to but sheer bloody-minded stubbornness." A raw, honest smile touched her lips. Thorn would approve. She smiled over at Xartok, who let out a breath he didn't know he held in. The others dug in. Sergeant Lee groaned in pleasure so profound it bordered on the obscene. The remaining warriors ate with a slow, meditative focus, passing every nuance of flavour. Xartok knew it was the highest honour his cuisine could receive. They translated his creation back into the language of experience. As the dishes were cleared, he approached their table once more. This was, he searched for the word, a collaboration. Captain Petrova's gaze met his, her scarred face revealing more warmth than he'd ever witnessed on the station. "Chef," she said, her voice rough with unshed emotion, "if we ever survive this foray into your federation, let's recreate this dish on Earth. Use real smoke, real ruined cityscape flavors. It would be a testament," he finished for her, understanding flashing into his eyes. Yes, it would. Because what was food, after all, but a story, a shared experience? And the humans, it seemed, had stories the galaxy desperately needed to savor, if only to understand the delicate balance between destruction and the resilient flame of survival. News of Xartok's peculiar creation buzzed through the station like a swarm of iridescent flies. Delegates who'd previously eyed the humans with thinly veiled unease now requested private audiences, drawn by the promise of tasting the abstract embodiment of humanity's struggle. It was unsettling, and yet Captain Petrova noticed a shift. The looks weren't just curious. They held a flicker of respect. Fear could be a motivator, but so it seemed could a dish that tasted of defiance. One evening, as the station glowed like a jewel against the cosmic dark, she was summoned to Ambassador Kellis's quarters. When she entered, an unexpected guest waited. A towering reptilian figure adorned in iridescent scales regarded her with an unreadable expression. "Captain Petrova," first speaker Rytak's voice rumbled, "I have tasted Chef Xartok's curious homage to your war." He inclined his head, a gesture that held a surprising degree of deference. It was enlightening. Anya felt a twist of unease. She'd never been comfortable turning their battles into entertainment, yet she understood its power. "It does not capture the whole story," she said defensively. "The lost lives, the fear." "Of course not," Rytak interrupted with surprising gentleness. "But it shapes what was previously just an echo, a rumor. Your species defied expectations, humans, and your resilience has unsettled the Federation as it was meant to. Yet, within Xartok's creation, I also sensed a determination not bent on domination, but on sheer survival. This changes things." Kellis cleared his throat. "We have a proposal, Captain. A cultural exchange. Xartok wishes to visit Earth to experience the source of these intense flavors firsthand. We believe it would send a powerful message. The species that fought so fiercely for their home world is also capable of sharing, of teaching. He watched her carefully, gauging her reaction. Anya's mind whirled. It was absurd and potentially dangerous, yet a flicker of reckless hope ignited within her. They'd played the fear card. Perhaps it was time for something new. "Earth is still in ruins," she said slowly. "There's not much to offer a chef accustomed to. Biodome delicacies." Rytak's scaled crest tilted, mirroring a smile. "Captain, I suspect Chef Xartok craves flavours far less refined than you imagine. Is this something you would consider participating in? Showing him not the wounds of war, but the spirit that endured it?" She pictured the desolation of her home city, the scars that still marred the landscape. A defiant joy lingered amidst the struggle to rebuild in these makeshift kitchens. Perhaps Xartok's quest for culinary extremity was the strangest bridge they could build. "We'll need flamethrowers for his spice-hunting expeditions," she deadpanned, then met Kellis's gaze. "But yes, Ambassador, consider it done." The summons came when Xartok was elbow-deep in a vat of fermented starkelp, a pungent concoction he hoped might mimic the metallic tang of fear the humans had described so vividly. He emerged, dripping, to find Captain Petrova waiting within his central biodome. Her usual stoicism was tinged with a peculiar gleam in her eyes, an emotion he eventually came to identify as amusement. "Chef," she began, "you're going to Earth." Xartok froze, his eyes blinking rapidly. "Earth," he echoed, the word both thrilling and terrifying. To acquire the ingredients firsthand. He'd envisioned this desperately, with each meticulously crafted recreation of the flavours born from war, but actually venturing into that scarred world. His mouth twitched in agitation, then stilled with dawning resolve. "They have agreed," she continued, an odd softness in her voice. "It's dangerous, of course. The world is still raw. But the first speaker himself sees the potential." She paused as if weighing her next words carefully. "They've learned to utilize their fear, Xartok. Perhaps this is a way to teach them to savor something else." A wave of complex emotions washed over him. Exhilaration, apprehension, and a sense of profound responsibility that had nothing to do with selecting the ripest nebula fruit. This wasn't just about creating a dish. This was a chance to translate resilience, to find the notes of defiant hope amidst the ashes. "I will need more than spices, Captain," he finally declared, all four arms gesturing in a flurry of excitement. "Access to battlefields, to stories, and perhaps," a mischievous glint entered his eyes, "to one of the flamethrowers you mentioned in your tales." Anya blinked rapidly, then laughed, a genuine sound that echoed through the biodome. "Strange as it sounds, Chef, I think we might just be able to arrange that." Xartok realized it was more than a culinary expedition. This was the beginning of a tenuous collaboration, translating the human experience into something even the most disparate races across the galaxy could, in some small way, understand. A dish isn't the path to peace, but it could be a perfect start to an interesting conversation.